Well, it is the top of the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm Catherine Boyle from Key Ministry, and with me is my colleague Beth Golick from Key Ministry. And we are just delighted to have a couple of our ministry friends join us today. John Felligeller is joining us from Chicago, and Melanie Gomez is joining us from sunny Florida. We've been talking before we jump on about the lovely bird of paradise flower behind Melanie that hopefully will get everybody thinking a little bit about vacations, because that's what we're going to be talking about today. You know, a lot has been going on in our world. You'd have to totally be sleeping under a rock if you didn't notice that. We're just so glad that Melanie and John have taken some time out to have this conversation with us today about what summer vacation might look like for, particularly for special needs families. Special needs families always have other things that have to be thought through before planning travel and vacation, and heck, even a trip to the grocery store. But you know, with COVID and with the unrest and the tragedy that happened last week, we just you know, there's just other things that may factor into what we're all thinking and planning as we move through June and on into summer. So a couple of housekeeping items as we're getting started. We are recording this, and we will be sharing this video on our social media platforms later this afternoon. So if you want to share it with somebody who's not able to join us today, it will be available on the Key Ministry social media pages and also on our coronavirus page on the Key Ministry website. We're also streaming live right now on the Not Alone Parents Facebook page. So if you're watching us in either place, thank you so much for joining us. And please do let us know if you have questions or comments. We definitely would like to hear from you, your thoughts, your concerns, your ideas for vacation this summer. So feel free, if you're on the webinar, to go ahead and post in the chat, or to go ahead and share a comment or question on the Key Ministry live stream on the Not Alone Parenting page. We will have some conversation with John and Melanie here in a second, but we will definitely weave in your questions and your comments. So if we don't get to you right away, just know that we will in a minute. So again, thanks so much, Melanie and John, for joining us. So John, if you could just take a minute and introduce yourself and you know, your connection with Key Ministry, and then Melanie, if you could take a turn after that, and then we'll start talking vacation.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Catherine. So yes, I'm John Felligeller from lovely Highwood, Illinois, in the north suburbs of Chicago. I am a newly single dad to a son with autism, Christopher, who's 12, autistic nonverbal. Currently, for my day job, I work for a local organization that does programming for special needs adults. I'm the program manager for them. And regarding Key Ministry, I've worked with Key Ministry now for the past few years as a contributing writer, blogger, also speaking at Inclusion Fusion, doing a whole variety of things, including these type of Facebook Live videos and working with some other special needs organizations around the country as well.
Awesome. Melanie?
Thank you, Catherine. My name is Melanie Gomez. As she mentioned, I'm coming to you from South Florida. And my relationship with Key Ministry is similar to John. I've been writing and speaking with Key Ministry for a few years now, and really became a follower first of Key Ministry and Not Alone Parenting as a special needs mom. I am married for 27 years. My anniversary was last week, and I have 2 young adult sons. My oldest is 22 and married. My youngest will turn 20 on Saturday. He'll be 20 years old. And Nicholas was born with a rare genetic disorder. And so that's kind of how I got into this family of special needs and special needs ministry. And that's really my passion, is sharing what God has taught me over these 20 years with other special needs families.
Wonderful. Well, so, you know, we touched on this just a second that, and Beth, feel free to jump in whenever you would like. I don't mean to monopolize the conversation because it's definitely a conversation today. But I'm just curious, both of you, John and Melanie, are avid vacation takers with your special needs kiddos, and that's part of why we invited you here today. So, what have you been thinking about vacation this summer? Do you have plans, or have those plans been put on hold or shifted some kind of way? And just, feel free to take turns answering, what you guys are doing personally.
I would first say that we have already done a mini vacation last weekend. I think that based on COVID requiring Nick to not be in school for the past 3+ months, our life has been so upside down in 2020. It's been so challenging, so much more difficult, particularly emotionally for him, and just kind of figuring out how to survive for the past 6 months has been really challenging. So when Florida began to open up, and our county was not last weekend fully open, but the west coast of Florida was, and as I mentioned, it was a wedding anniversary as well, my husband said, we got to get out of here. We got to get out of here, and we knew that we needed to do it safely. We know, of course, exposure to COVID is at a much higher danger level for special needs kids and special needs families, and for all of us, it's a much more crucial decision to take to go anywhere. But that being said, the reason we are avid vacationers is because we avidly believe in doing family things and enjoying our lives together, whatever that looks like with special needs. But we actually booked an Airbnb. We drove over to the west coast of Florida, and we spent a couple days walking over to the beach and being socially distanced, but being out of our house. Getting out of our house took on an entirely higher level of importance for us. And we are planning some other getaways as well.
So Melanie, I know that your family does travel, and you do airline travel, and you've done a ton of research. What are some specific things you researched for last weekend? So during these, very unique times, where did you go for information?
Sure. I really, my concern was specific to COVID and safety of travel, because the travel part is something that we've gotten down. And so I would say, as a side note, we've been traveling with Nicholas since he was little. And so the sooner we get used to traveling, the better. That's a whole different conversation. But I really researched both on health websites about safety and safety concerns, as well as through Airbnb. I researched very thoroughly where we would go, where we could go, what would be offered, how safe and clean it would be, the town we were going to be staying in, what were their rules, what were their restrictions, and did the same things we're doing here at home. I still do have to go to the store, and I've had to take Nicholas with me. Other things. So it was really like being at home, but it was somewhere else. And honestly, that's what special needs vacationing looks like for us. It's not vacation like other people take it. It's just being somewhere else in a different venue and still being a special needs parent. But that's really, really important psychologically for everyone in the family.
Mm-hmm. And John, your vacationing looks a little different. You're a big camper. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
So
well,
tell us a little bit about what you've done in the past and what you're kind of thinking about for this summer.
Sure, absolutely. So what I'll say is that, and if you followed some of my writings on this, or, one of the other presentations I had done, that in our family, it was really kind of this kind of slow developing process of, okay, how do we really do vacations with our son? For years, we had taken him to water parks and those kind of resort type of places. And the problem is that he got to a point where he literally would refuse to sleep. because he would be so wound up and so excited. And I can tell you that there were a couple of years in a row where we literally stayed up with him all night. And because we didn't want to wake the people next door to us, we decided to take our son down to the lobby, show him that the water park was closed. He still refused to get it. And so we basically were hanging out in the middle of this hotel lobby 1, 2 in the morning because we didn't want to wake the neighbors. So there was a slow genesis there of, okay, how do we do vacations differently? Our son does not fly. We had looked at some, and I can mention them a little bit later on, some of these programs that some of the airlines do to help special needs kids with acclimating. But we just weren't really convinced of it yet. So we finally decided that, our son really likes to be outside and we really like to be outside. So my ex-wife now actually came up with the idea of camping. Now, I will tell you that at first, the idea of sleeping in a tent, even though I love nature, it wasn't that attractive to me. And I was also concerned with a special needs child. Okay, what happens if, he's got an issue with some of the creature comforts not being there, especially the bathrooms not being as available, issues with the weather, temperature, that type of thing. We tried it for a year, and I would say that we definitely had some fun, but we had some challenges. And finally, we wrapped our head around doing a travel trailer, specifically an Airstream trailer, which we actually bought last year. And we did several trips with, and I would tell you that they were mostly successful. So I think when we talk about camping, a lot of special needs families or even typical families might kind of snub their noses at it, saying it's too much work, too much trouble. What we actually found is that it is some work, but it also allows for some freedoms that we normally wouldn't have in some other situations. We really can kind of dictate our own process and where we go and when we leave and how long we stay and all that. And if our son doesn't like something, then we just don't stay there. The challenge now, though, of course, is first of all, we have COVID. And second of all, we've had a change in the dynamic of our family since my wife and I are now divorced. So we did have a lot of stuff initially planned, a lot of trips. Those trips, for the most part, have really just gone away. I know that my son's mom is planning on probably doing at least one trip with him a little bit later in the summer. I actually have a trip planned with him to a water park in Wisconsin Dells for actually 4th of July weekend. I did see that those resorts, especially up there, are now opening up, and they do have some restrictions, but they will still allow us to go. So I'm going to cross my fingers that I can survive that weekend with him. But it is something that he enjoys doing. So, it's also seeing, how life is going to be different for us in terms of our family on some other levels as well here. But I would tell you that overall trips have been drastically reduced and shortened, both in terms of the amount of travel we're doing and then the length of those stays.
I want to jump in on something John just said. He said, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope I survive. And honestly, I think that makes travel sometimes just too intimidating for special needs families. Like, my child doesn't like to be out of his routine. He doesn't like to not sleep in this place or eat this brand of chicken nuggets. And so sometimes those are such overwhelming concerns, but John's still going to do it. I'm still going to do it. And so my Facebook page and my website are called Redefine Special. And so my challenge sometimes to special needs parents is redefine vacation. Vacation for me doesn't look like a vacation for a family with a typical child, but that doesn't mean it's not worth going on a vacation. And so it is more work for us. It is sometimes more challenging. Being awake in a lobby of a hotel makes you think I'd rather just be awake at home, but there are so many benefits. There are benefits. There are life lessons. There are important experiences for your child who doesn't like to be out of their routine. It's great for them to be out of the routine. And so there's a lot of benefits that go into, just as we know, being a special needs parent is not that easy, but it has blessings and benefits. And I would challenge families to look at travel in that same way.
Excellent.
So we would welcome to hear from the people that are watching. So you can either, if you're on the webinar, you can let us know in the chat, or if you're watching this on Facebook, excuse me, let us know in the Facebook chat. But what vacations did you have planned? What vacations are you thinking about? Are there Disney people out there? What's running through your head? Melanie's like, yes. That's a whole nother whole other webinar, right? So what are you what plans did you have before all this went down, or what are you kind of thinking now that we're in a new normal, so to speak? So go ahead and, we'll monitor the chats if if anybody wants to share or has questions on that.
I would say, I would also throw in, we are actually doing a theme park next weekend. We're in Florida. So again, it's a driving vacation. We're not yet at flying vacations, although we've flown a lot with Nicholas. He's flown to Australia, he's flown to Europe, he's flown all over the US. Those are all things that are doable as well with, as Beth asked, with research and information. And I'm kind of an expert at all of this. And so I would welcome anybody to message me or email me really for specifics of TSA phone numbers and airline phone numbers. There are absolutely accommodations, but we're considering driving again to a theme park. It's Nick's 20th birthday, and he's actually a theme park addict. And so one of the things that's been really stressful for him is that in March, we had planned a trip to a theme park and then Disney closed. And so that has been a really challenging disappointment for him for months. And so we are going to be going, Universal Studios is opening, not Disney, but we are going up to Universal Studios this weekend for his 20th birthday. And so we've done all the research. We've called all the customer service phone numbers. We've talked to every special needs assistant person that we can find, and we feel comfortable, again, doing some extra work, going to into a situation that may cause some additional stress, but that also is going to be really helpful. I think in light of COVID, even more helpful to get out of the house and do something that, at least in our pictures, when we look back on them, they're going to look fun. So.
Well, John, I've been thinking a lot about, camping and getting out into, the park kind of setting. And I was wondering, have you looked into any guidance that has been issued from like the National Park System or the park system that is near you? And so like, what are people able to do now, or what is emerging that people are able to do for those who want to either go camping in a park or who just want to go to a park for a day? Is that something you've even looked into?
Sure, absolutely. So I'll tell you in terms of our own family. Yeah, you know what? Our response basically was we just kind of canceled the majority of the trips. I know, as I stated, my ex was looking at possibly one, and we still are having some conversations about that. I would tell you, first of all, that on the one hand, things are opening up. So for example, in Illinois, the state parks just opened back up. The state parks had been closed along with a lot of the other smaller community things. So even if you were looking at, there's actually a lot of great parks that are within, an hour or two drive from us, which a lot of times is perfect. And that's all you need, especially for a weekend trip. But again, they had just reopened. And even though they're starting to reopen, there's also issues with, when the facilities will reopen, because the parks themselves may be reopened, but bathroom and shower facilities may not be available right away. And the other thing to consider is that even though something is reopened, and this is a conversation that, especially in the regular work that I do, working with special needs families, there's all these precautions that families themselves are still wanting to take. So even if you say, hey, this is open now, go for it, most families are hesitant, and we get that. So that's where, even in our own family, we're saying things are opening up, and they're opening up slowly. Doesn't mean we necessarily want to go there. And another one of the concerns too is that, with camping, you have a lot of options, which is great, but then you also need to really understand what your options are. State park camping, at least by us, is probably, on the one hand, it's beautiful. And it certainly helps when you have your own travel house that you take with, because of course, the great thing about having a travel trailer or an RV is that you can maintain, your own level of cleanliness and disinfect and expectations for what that's going to be like. And in theory, even if you had a tent, but the problem is that then you're having to use facilities and you don't necessarily know if they are the cleanest. And I will tell you that, in Illinois, at least, some of those facilities that I've personally experienced tend to be lacking in terms of cleanliness in general, and especially when you have something going on still like COVID now. So, my general take on it is, yes, we're looking at trips, but I don't know that I would necessarily recommend, even to a family, if they were just going to go camping, you might want to look at a private chain campground like a KOA or a Jellystone, because then they also maintain their own staff and they also maintain a slightly higher level of cleanliness across the board. They themselves may have restrictions, and I know some of them are also delayed in terms of their openings. So some of that, and again, it's also dependent on the state as well. So some of those may be in June or they may not be until July. So that's where you really want to identify, if you're going to do a campground, do a private chain type of a campground. And again, even though I say the word chain, yes, it's a corporate entity, but they're all individually owned and operated. They're franchises. And so if you find one that has great reviews and great ratings, then that's kind of the direction you want to go, because then, across the board, even without COVID, they've maintained their grounds, and now they're especially being vigilant about it. So those are the things that I would look for if you decide to go that route.
So John, you mentioned well, I think everybody's mentioned it kind of varies by state. Definitely some states are kind of opening up before others. And I know, for instance, I'm in Ohio, and all of our Johnny and Friends family retreats have been canceled for the year. And I know that's not the case. I think Sandra's watching, but in Texas, she said they're still happening. So that was a huge disappointment for families when the family retreats got canceled, because that is their vacation. What are some ideas that you might have for perhaps staycations or things that aren't quite as elaborate as traveling, across state or doing a week-long family retreat?
Sure, absolutely. Well, it's fascinating too with COVID, kind of what has come out of that. We have so many, at least where I live, for example, in Northern Illinois, and for most folks, you probably have some wonderful, state, if it's not a state park, like a local forest preserve, tied to your county, that type of thing. I see people out there more now than ever, in fact, to the point where you can't even get parking spots these days. So, the fascinating thing about the staycation too is that, for example, I live, pretty near to Chicago. There are so many wonderful things to do when you live in a large metro area. And a lot of it in the same way that you would plan a longer trip with your special needs child, those smaller trips can really also be based on their interests. So for example, with my own son, this is something we had done in years past. We looked at, first of all, identifying places that he liked. So he does like being outside. He likes being in nature. There's all kind of opportunities for that. But also, we looked at how to make that roll into kind of like a life skills experience. So we tried him on, the local metro train, in and out of the suburbs into the city, and then get on some of the L trains in the city type of a thing, and be able to ride those around and understand, okay, look, this is how you get from A to B, and we're going to look for train lines, we're going to look for color coding, and how to safely get on and get off and that type of thing. And, those smaller things, especially for a child who hasn't had a lot of experience with them, that's magic. That's like a ride at Disney, right? Because it's something they've never experienced. And it's something that's very interactive, because, you're showing them how to do some of these different things that they normally wouldn't have a chance to. So, I would say take advantage of, obviously there's all kind of touristy things in your areas that, people could possibly pick out, but really identify what your child likes, right? My child loves trains, like a lot of, special needs friends I also know do. Well, there's a train museum in the Chicago area you can take them to. If you don't want to just ride them on the regular, commuter trains. Your child may very much enjoy being outside, but maybe they also enjoy some indoor activities. Those are going to be limited now, again, because of COVID, because of some different restrictions. But then you see, okay, how can you replicate those as best as possible? Everything will be open at some point, so you may have access to some of those museums or play places, but also think about what are some different things maybe you could replicate in a home or close to home. We can't go to the kids museum to do this, that, and the other thing on the giant climbing things. Okay, well, you know what? It's kind of like friends who are hesitant about taking their kids to a public pool or to a water park. A lot of people are getting their own pools in their backyards, right? So same kind of idea. Think about maybe investing in something for the summer. Think about, do I want to get maybe a little bigger pool that everybody can enjoy outside? Do I want to get maybe some extra sensory equipment or climbing things, depending on what your space allows in your home? Do you want to invest in some of those things, because you're going to be limited to what you can do outside and the places you can go? Maybe you kind of build into that, and I'm sure folks have already been kind of doing that already with COVID anyway. But then you kind of look at that as the staycation that literally is at home, and then kind of pick your battles in terms of the different places you can be out in the community as well.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think that this is a great season to start practicing to take a big vacation for families that haven't taken that leap yet. John's suggestions are perfect because you can just start practicing expanding your child's horizons. I mentioned that we started traveling with Nicholas when he was very, very small. And so he has a tolerance for it. I guess is the nicest word. He can tolerate travel because we did it so often as he was young and did it for longer and longer periods. So this is a great season to do that. Maybe it's if there's a lake or a beach or a park, as he said, an hour's drive away that maybe you just go to for the whole day, or you go and do one night and come back. Start building those muscles and creating those experiences. One of the things that we do that helps Nicholas whenever we're going somewhere new is we start showing him pictures and videos, and if there's something similar in a movie that he's seen or that we can show him a snippet of, that's really helpful for him. It builds anticipation and it builds anxiety too. It's a whole combination of things that happen, but it's part of the process. So we'll show him a picture. This is where we're going. Show them the movie. Show them. I go to the website. I start clicking on pictures, even if it's a local museum. Clicking on pictures, showing him the pictures of it, and in those pictures, there's kids touching stuff. So now he sees what's happening. So it's not just try it and go on vacation. There certainly is some work. John talked about a lot of research and work and preparation that goes into it and using it as life skills. So again, redefine what vacation means. Vacation is different for our families, but it is so important. And doing some work as you would if you were researching a therapy intensive session that you were going to go to, or you were researching a new specialist. Honestly, I approach vacation destinations almost with that same veracity of making sure that it's doable, and if it's doable, we push through, and we give everyone a different space to be in. And I think that's kind of the key, and especially because of COVID, being in a different space, even if it's for a day or a half a day, a new different space is valuable to everyone. I remember when Nicholas was younger, having kind of a breakdown with my husband and saying, don't you realize that vacations aren't a vacation for me? Like it was very real and raw for me that going on vacation was such a hard job. And over time, I realized in my conversation with him that vacation was so crucial for my husband. So, and he wanted to take our family, and he wanted Nicholas to have those experiences. So as the mom and the worker who still had to pack all the medicines and vitamins and the applesauce and and all of that preparation, same thing. It was a job. It was a chore. It was something I had to prepare for, but it was something I needed to provide my family. So it's work and it's challenging, but it's going to come with some definite benefits. And practicing now with a staycation or a day trip is a great way to get started on expanding those horizons for your family.
That's great. Along those lines, obviously a lot of people aren't doing air travel right now, regardless of what plans they had. Melanie, I know you did a ton of preparation leading into any air travel that you did. Can you just give us a few examples or a few pointers or a few resources that you used to get Nicholas set for air travel?
Yeah, absolutely. And I have found that air travel, aside from the obvious, my child has to sit in a seat for a certain number of hours, right, which is just a thing. Aside from that, I have found air travel at most major airports and on most major airlines to be really accessible with the research. For example, looking into the airport website, Miami International Airport, O'Hare International Airport have a special needs assistance section on their website that talks about where are their companion bathrooms. The best companion bathrooms I've found so far in my world have been at airports. And I know where they all are. I know where they are at O'Hare. I know where they are at Miami International. So airports have assistance. Airlines have assistance. American Airlines in Miami runs rehearsal flights. That's probably what John was talking about, where you can actually go and practice boarding and sitting and deplaning on an airplane somewhere off to the side. They run them, I think, once or twice a month, those rehearsals, dress rehearsals at the airport. So airlines have resources. The TSA actually has a special assistance program where you can make a reservation and say, I am flying in and out of this airport on this date. My flight is at 4 o'clock. You make a reservation and a TSA agent meets you and facilitates your process through TSA, so you don't have to do that long line that's forever and to take off your shoes and put your jacket back on, which honestly is one of the most challenging parts of process traveling with my son, is that whole TSA experience, because there's 400 people in line and they're all stressed out, and he can sense that they're all stressed out. So TSA has a resource, has a phone number, an 800 phone number you can call and make that reservation. Pre-boarding on an airline is available. So we always pre-board. We always go to the gate agent and say, listen, we take extra time to get on an airplane. We're going to pre-board. They let us do it. We found out recently, American Airlines usually, now they have this economy ticket where only 2 people can sit together, and we need all 3 of us to sit together. I found a phone number through American Airlines. If I call, they'll transfer me to a special assistance line, where if I explain that my son has to sit with both of his parents, they will waive the extra fees and put the 3 of us together. So I have found air travel to be accommodating if you do the research, do the work, and make all the phone calls, make all the reservations. It has been a fairly a fairly comfortable process once I put all of that in place. Now, Nicholas still has to sit still on an airplane. I mentioned that we went to Australia. That's a really, really long time. When they were younger, I would use Benadryl. I don't know. I don't know if I can say that but there are ways to, again, preparation. Buy brand new apps, movies, books, toys that they've never seen before, and you don't crack it out till you get on the plane. If they're never allowed to have Coke ever, give them a Coke or a Sprite. There's different little tricks that help. I've been on planes where the mom behind me handed out a little card and a gift to all the people sitting around her that said, I'm going to let you know that my child has sensory issues and may not do well on this flight, and I appreciate your patience, and thank you for working with us. And there are ways to do it, and air travel is how you get to all the super cool places. For us, at least, we don't have the time to spend a week somewhere and drive a week back. So we fly, and it works.
And meanwhile, the rest of us have to fly to Florida to get to the theme parks.
Right, exactly.
In the Facebook chat, Amy is sharing that the mock flights by American Airlines are outstanding.
Great.
And Melanie, she also says, thank you for sharing that the TSA has a resource to make the process smoother.
Yeah, the worst part is that they don't advertise those things. So that's the challenging part, is finding, as I found, honestly, with everything in special needs life, right? The educational system, the medical profession, all of them have resources. You just have to find somebody that tells you where to look. Otherwise, you may never find it.
If I could can I just jump in here for a second? A few years ago, my family, we like to snow ski while we're still able to, walk on these legs and hips. And so we took our kids out west to ski. And while we were getting on a gondola lift, there was a little team of people who were working with a child who was probably about 10 years old, helping him learn how to get on the gondola. And it was obvious that he had special needs, but they were absolutely part of a program that was available at that particular resort. And so that sort of thing, I mean, maybe you guys have experience with that sort of thing, but I just was so excited to see that something like that was available for families who like to go to that kind of location, whether it's a summertime trip, because most of those type places operate in the summer as well, not just for skiing in the winter. But I just was so excited to see that, for that family that wanted to share the love of travel, like, you guys have shared with your children.
And I was just going to jump into Catherine on the flight program. American Airlines, that mock flight program is called Ready for Flight. And, as Melanie was saying, so we actually got plugged into it because a family friend actually worked for American and was able to get us in. Usually what we found is that, at least at O'Hare, there is a special needs organization that runs day programming that has partnered with American locally here in Chicago. So if you're not part of that community, generally you don't get that invite. However, I think it's at least worth the research or the phone call to say, hey, I know that you guys have this program. Is there a way that we can get plugged in, at some date and time? I do know from doing some other research that some other airports around the country, and I don't know that it's specific to an airline, but some other airports around the country, and I want to say it's a pretty exhaustive list, do some form of this mock, going through TSA and boarding the flight and, just kind of the experience of being on the plane. So I know you can Google that. I don't know the exact list, but I know I found a list. Some are smaller airlines, not always the bigger ones. But again, it's not always tied to a particular airline, so you may have some better luck there too.
One tip I forgot that's huge is traveling at odd hours. Do not book your flight at rush hour in the airport. That's a really helpful one. That makes a huge difference for us and for the patience levels of the other people in the airport, the staff, the travelers. That has been really helpful for us. Catherine, as you mentioned about that ski resort, I would definitely say I find special needs accommodations in a lot of places now, but you do have to do that research. Go on the website of wherever you're going. And that helps us, that informs the choices that we make often of which destination we're going to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lady who commented on the Facebook chat that Ascend IGO and BOEC and NSCD in Colorado have special needs ski programs and summer programs that are amazing. So it's Ascend, ASCEND, IGO, BOEC, and NSCD.
That's great. Yeah, there are options. There are definitely, and it's just finding them. And so this call, for example, is super helpful. Even the chat comments are really helpful for community, and share those.
So Melanie, you mentioned that you have stayed at Airbnbs. Can you, and John, you having the Airstream Traveler or trailer, you have, an alternate place to stay as well. Can you tell us a little bit about how you choose different accommodations and as opposed to just booking a hotel room?
Definitely, I would say that we transitioned to Airbnbs quite a few years ago, and it was just based on having a kitchen. So there are some dietary and other reasons that we needed a kitchen, having more space to be able to move around, and having TVs and all of those things just accommodate our family better than a hotel room. So it's definitely something to consider. Hotel rooms can be really small and confined, and not having a kitchen for us was a big deal because of medication and other things we needed, and timing of when feedings needed to happen. Airbnb I have found to be a really great tool and have a lot of detailed information about their listings. And so again, there's, you can even Google tips for using that tool of Airbnb, of finding, they have special super hosts, which means they've been scored a certain place on cleanliness and hygiene, especially now. That's what I was looking for last weekend when we went to the beach. I wanted to make sure that the host, you want to make sure the host has had tons of reviews, which means lots of people stayed there. You want to make sure that every cleanliness score is 5 stars. You want to look into little details, especially for sensory kids. You want to look into details about the air conditioning and heating. You want to look into the bed linens. I check out all of those things. I check out if they don't have cable or satellite TV or a certain level of internet where we could bring our own Apple TV. It's a do not enter zone for us, no matter how beautiful. As a matter of fact, for the beach trip, I found a great place that was on the beachfront, but we weren't going to be able to get Disney Channel or some of the other non-negotiables for our family. So we ended up going to a different place that was a little bigger, and it had satellite television, and it had some. So, I'm saying get into a new space and try new things. And I'm also saying be realistic about some of the comforts that are going to help your child in a new environment. And so for us, an Airbnb provides that a little bit more than a hotel. And so we've been doing Airbnb for quite a while. Top requirements are cleanliness, superhost, configuration, like his room can't be on the other side and then our room, or else he'll just be in our room the whole time. The little things, little details that you can really sort through. We're able to take his service dog with us to an Airbnb. That makes a big difference as well. So there's a lot of little details you can sort on that maybe a hotel stay doesn't afford you.
Have you
And
seen
John,
any?
I've been that parent that has the kids that won't sleep, and you feel like you can't be in your hotel room. And yeah, I don't think Airbnb was around when my kids were
Yeah.
little, or I didn't know about it at least. So
And regarding how you find a good campsite, if you do a travel trailer or RV type of a thing, it's kind of similar to finding a hotel in that you want to be looking at the type of amenities they offer. So, and that's why a lot of times the chain campgrounds, like what I mentioned, are really the way to go, because a lot of times they offer a lot more amenities in terms of pools, maybe a private beach, a lot of things that are accessible. And again, you also have a lot of staff there, that really can provide things for you if necessary. Whereas at a state park, you're really kind of on your own. So, on the one hand, it's great if you have your own space that you kind of travel with, because then, as Melanie was kind of saying, you can maintain that the way you need to. I know in our case with the trailer, there's all kinds of trailers you can look at. The reason why we bought the exact one we did, even though it was one of the more pricier ones, is the fact that, one, we know our child can be rough on stuff, and so we wanted something that was durable and well built. It also had the biggest bathroom out of all of them, right? So a wet bath, that you usually find in a lot of these guys, wasn't going to work for him. We needed a big bathroom because, again, we are in there helping and assisting him with the bathing and toileting, and obviously a kitchen and TV and all these different creature comforts, the AC, because that's what he needs to be comfortable. And but again, the amount of time that he spends in there really is sleeping and maybe a little bit of eating. Most times we would eat outside just because it was easier. And then he's on the go. So I know in his case, for example, one particular campground that we really liked was a Jellystone, which is very popular in the Midwest here. And it had a water park and a pool and all of that type of thing. And for whatever reason, he wasn't into it, which normally he is. But what he did love was the fact they had a private lake and a private beach. And he just spent all day in the water. And he didn't need slides or any of this stuff. We bought a couple of blow-up thingies, and he was good. So, it's really looking at, again, what your kids are into. And again, it doesn't have to be the fanciest bells and whistles. It can be as simple as they had a big lake, and he just wanted to go to that. Great. And so again, you look at those things, and I think the last consideration I would say also too is in terms of travel. When you travel that way, distance does factor in, because first of all, you want to, if you're newer like we are and we have been, you're not going to go to Yosemite your first time or your first summer kind of a thing. So you work up to those things. As well as with having a special needs child, you also don't want to be out in the middle of someplace like that and have something break or break down, and now you have a problem. So I would also just kind of add in there too a couple of safety things if you travel, especially with road trips like this, that have been recommended and we found useful. One, it really helps if your vehicle has some type of an OnStar type of a communication thing, so that in case your cell phone is not working, you can get someone live on the line who can send roadside assistance or whatever it is. And you may also want to invest in some type of either a CB or like a ham radio walkie-talkie type of a thing. You can get a satellite phone, which are way expensive. And if you don't want to go that route, a CB is a nice way to go, because you can always monitor things like weather, or if there are any kind of events happening, that where safety is concerned. But you can also communicate as well, and those are relatively cheap, and you can get them online. So there's a couple of options there too in terms of making sure you're safe, especially these days, because there are a lot of things we're all dealing with. So.
Right. So could you each tell us how people can follow you or reach you, because you've provided such great information, and I have a feeling people are going to want to learn more from you.
Yeah, I would be happy to continue this conversation with anyone. The easiest place to find me is on Facebook. Is on my page is Redefine Special. That's the easiest place. I also have a website, redefinespecial.com, so you can email me from there as well.
Thank you. John?
Sure, and so I don't have a website yet, but it's coming. So johnfelgeller.com is on its way very soon. But until then, you can find me on Facebook. I have a blog page on there, John's Special Needs blog on Facebook. You can certainly just find me on Facebook normally and send me a message or a friend connection. Happy to connect with you there as well.
And I can tell you that they're both linked to the writers page on keyministry.org. So if you go to keyministry.org and look for our writers, you'll find both Melanie and John, and links to how you can connect with them. All right. I think we have covered all the chats. And Catherine is posting these links in, for those of you who are watching the webinar live, she is posting them in the Zoom chat. Any last words of advice to share with our viewers?
I think we've said it all, and I think the theme has been pretty evident, but it's that vacation is some work, some research, and maybe challenging in different ways, but it's really valuable for your family, for your whole family, especially if you have typical kids, especially for mom and dad. It's really, really valuable. And with the right research, the right work put in on the back end, it's going to be something that can and will bless your family and provide some much needed change of scenery and change of venue, particularly now, perhaps more than ever before.
Hey, can I just throw out here a question we just got in the chat, and somehow we managed not to cover this, which is surprising because we covered so much, but the question came up about safety for children who tend to be elopers or who run, if they're either they're anxious or it's an unfamiliar setting. Have you guys experienced that? Do you have any tips for helping manage that kind of behavior in an unfamiliar setting?
I can tell you that we use a product called Angel Sense, which is a GPS that attaches to Nicholas, and we've used that for a while now here locally, and when he takes the bus home from school, as well as on vacation. And we have something called vacation rules. We actually call them New York rules, because the first time we implemented them was in New York, and Nick knows and understands New York rules, which means you have to hold someone's hand or we don't go out on the vacation. We stay in, the same as wearing a seatbelt being non-negotiable for us. No matter what sensory issues, no matter what challenges, we decided a long time ago, if you don't wear your seatbelt, we will not leave the house. On vacation, you follow New York rules, or we have to just stay here in the hotel or in the Airbnb. And so, again, that's kind of something you can build up to, but definitely non-negotiable for us are those extra rules for vacation. And do what you have to do without worrying about what other people think or say, or if it's not how you typically manage your child at home, but you need to use the little telescoping leash, or you need to apply a GPS, or you need to grab them by the wrist to secure their safety. That's absolutely one of the things that we've done and do.
Yeah, and I would echo what Melanie said. We haven't tried a GPS with our son yet, but it is definitely something we've looked at, and I think that's a great solution. In a more general sense, I would say that one thing we're always conscious of when we're on vacations are the fact that you really need to make sure that you are, as the parents and as the family, however many you have in your group, that you're always supporting each other and communicating and also checking in with each other, because like in our case, someone always has to be with our son. So you want to really make sure that, one, you're avoiding burnout, but that also everybody is actually enjoying themselves, right? Because that's the last thing, is to not have fun on the vacation, because that is the whole point of it. So, make sure that everybody is kind of supported, give, each other respite, when necessary, and remember that you're doing it, to have a good time, and I think that's really the spirit of it. So make sure you're communicating and supporting each other and lifting each other up, all through the process.
That's great. Amy pointed out in the chat, so in response to this particular topic of elopers, is to have a medical alert bracelet, and then that way, if your child does get separated from you, he or she can be identified really easily, and you can get contacted.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're getting some thank yous in the Facebook chat, so thank you both for being here today. I encourage everybody to follow Melanie and John, and they have great information to share. And plus, I want to see what they're up to this summer.
I'll be posting all our vacation pictures.
That's right. That's right. So, thank you,
Thank
Catherine.
you so much.
Any last words?
Thank you both. Thank you, Key Ministry, for the opportunity. It was great.
Yes, thank you, guys. Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.